clock slowly clicks down. The closer it gets to 0, it's as though time is standing still. It's not going to go to slow-mo. It's almost like time is going backwards as they see it go 3, 2, 1, and 0 can't come fast enough. The moment it goes to 0, those cannons go, confetti goes up in the air, and it's all starting to come down. But it's not just confetti coming down from the sky. There's people from the bleachers. Everyone who's seen it, they are up out of their seats. They are coming down, swarming the field. Unless they're on the losing team, who just got their heart ripped out from them. Everything they were hoping and praying for, lost. As their heads are down, as they're walking out, the winning team just comes down and there's this ruckus there. It's loud, it's crazy, it's chaotic. Yes, everything else was beautifully crafted up until this one moment. It just seems like there's this one mosh pit there until emerging from that mosh pit, there's this one person who gets lifted up there. And now he's crowd surfing, but he's totally out of control. And you just hear the crowd, Eli. The adrenaline is coursing through his body, the greatest victory ever. And now he's there, and somehow magically, within just a few minutes, the stage has been erected. The king, the commissioner, is there ready to hand the trophy. There's an MVP trophy. We already know who's getting that. And all of a sudden, Elijah is passed from hand to hand, person to person, and he's put on the stage there. All of the worshipers of Yahweh, all the followers of God, and now even all the doubters who said it could never be there are there in this moment, this Super Bowl of spirituality. The reporter goes up to him, Elijah, how you feeling today? That was a long battle. You guys started praying at the very beginning of the day. Now the very end, I could tell you were tired at the end. You only had a 56-word prayer. How did you hang in there? How was your stamina? Oh, it's a tough one. That's why we do off-season workouts. At Prophet School, they've got you memorizing scripture till late at night and waking up early to pray. And really it was that stamina there, but really it's all those times we see God show up in the off season that we knew we had confidence that God would come through now. Wow. Now, Elijah, it's interesting. The rules for this battle were very different. You had this crazy idea that there'd be one of you, 450 prophets of Baal, and Baal's kind of been the big guy on the block. It was 1 on 450. How'd you come up with the idea that whichever God set the ram on fire first would win? That was crazy. We've never seen anything like that. He's like, well, they say I was alone, but I never felt alone because I knew God was with me. But also, I thought it was kind of cheeky. Baal, they have images of him, and they're a cow, a ram. And I thought, you know what, if we set an image of Baal on fire, I thought that was kind of cool. Now, Elijah, through that, we kind of heard you, even everyone in the stand, you were talking a lot of trash during that battle. What were you saying to the prophets of Baal? Well, maybe my confidence got ahead of me. That's just part of the game. Trash talk's just part of the game here. Maybe I got a little bit out of control. But in that time, I was so confident that Yahweh was going to come through. I knew with those 2 rams there, I saw them trying for hours, praying, singing, dancing, and Baal never showed up. I just knew Yahweh was going to come through. Maybe I got a little bored. Maybe I got confident, but that's all behind us now. We know who the one true God is. Last question for you. What was it like when you saw the fire? What was it like seeing those folks' eyes light up as they see God do this miracle? What are you feeling now? I mean, you just won the spiritual Super Bowl. What are you going to do next? And in that moment, the camera zooms in on him. Jump cut to inside of his brain where he's going back and thinking about how the people have wavered between Yahweh and Baal for so long. And he's seen even people he loved walk away from the one true God, the one who made a covenant to him, the one who rescued the people, the one who made a promise to the people. And in this moment, all that struggle feels like, oh, finally the people believe. He then thinks to those moments, those hours waiting for God to answer his prayer, to do that miracle, and thinking about that moment where he's like, what if I'm wrong here? This is going to be really awkward. What if I spoke too much too soon? What if God doesn't come through? And then he sees that moment where the folks in the crowd have that moment where they see firsthand that there's one God. It's the God who created them, who chose them, who rescued them from Israel, who said he'll never leave them or never forsake them. And he sees that moment in their eye, and he has no words. And so that question just lingers. You've just won the Super Bowl. What are you going to do next? and he doesn't quite know what to say. So the story picks up in 1 Kings 19. After this spiritual Super Bowl, after Elijah went 1 on 450 against the prophets of Baal, after there was this sign of whatever God was stronger would show up and do a miracle with fire, you've just won the spiritual Super Bowl. What are you going to do next? 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 1. Now Ahab, that's the king, told Jezebel, that's his wife, prophetess of another religion. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, that he just won it all, that he was crowned MVP, that all of the crowd are now loving, trusting Yahweh instead of Baal, told everything Elijah had done and had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Elijah just won the Super Bowl. He doesn't have to be afraid. There's revival throughout the entire land. Everyone has turned from Baal. How does Elijah just won the Super Bowl? What does he do next? Verse 3. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. That's the right answer, by the way, laughing. When he came to Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went for a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under a tree, and prayed that he might die. Here's his exact words. I've just won the Super Bowl, but I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. And then he laid under the bush and fell asleep. What? This makes no sense. Elijah just won one of the greatest battles of his lifetime against the false gods, the false religions, showed clearly, unequivocally that Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who reveals himself in the scriptures, who reveals himself in the person and work of Jesus, it is clear. How do you go from the greatest moment of your life to the next chapter? You're alone, depressed, in a cave, asking God to kill you. So I'm like, well, I've never been there. Okay, maybe you haven't been in that deep, dark place of depression. Maybe you haven't felt like you've been under that kind of spiritual attack, but maybe you found yourself in some sort of cave, not like his. Maybe it's not a literal cave, but it's a metaphorical cave where you're alone. It's getting dark. The walls feels like they're caving in. The stalactites and stalagmites seem like they're getting bigger and longer and crushing in on you. And every time that little bit of water comes and drips down that stalagmite and hits the ground, you hear that little voice and you jump. You're like, what if someone found me? I don't know if your cave looks like a mental health struggle. I don't know if you're there and you feel alone because no one else sees, understands, or gets you. I don't know if it's a spiritual struggle where you feel like, God, I don't know if I can trust you anymore. I trust you yesterday, but I don't know if I can now. I don't know what cave you've been in, and I don't know what your struggle is, but what we're gonna see is even the mighty can fall. Even those who one day have complete and total faith in Jesus can struggle the next. And the cause of the struggle is interesting. God's answer, more interesting, almost surprising. But what we learn about God, what we learn about ourselves, and what we learn about how God leads us in these tough times is definitely gonna surprise you. So as we walk through this story, we're gonna see some things. We're gonna lay some crumbs along the way, and I hope that as you come, you just kind of pick them up one by one, because those same crumbs that God leaves in this is really your path to get back to him. And the crumbs are really his way of saying, I've already come and given you everything you need. Just come and take that next step for me, towards me. So how do you go from cloud 9 to crash down? Lots of things that can cause this. One thing, as I look directly at the story, what do I see? I see Elijah at this moment where there's incredible public success. Everything you've ever wanted as a prophet is to show up and show out for your God. And when the adrenaline is there, the crowd and the eyes are on you, you have so much faith. But then what happens the very next day is the struggle. Let me warn you, friends. For you, it may not be a supernatural battle, but I think we all have that thing in our lives that we say, once I or God does this, everything will be better. Man, once I get that promotion, I don't have to deal with that boss, and I have all the money I need to take care of my family. Once I get that promotion, everything's great. Once I get in or out of that relationship, everything is gonna be better. Once I have proven to the coach that I should be the starter on the team because I got the game-winning goal in the next one, what happens is you get it, and then two things happen. Number one, it's never as satisfying as you think it is. The sweetness does not last as long as you think it will. And then you realize, oh my gosh, this thing I've spent my life chasing is actually more hollow than I realize. And it's good, but it in and of it by itself. But Kyle, what he's doing is a spiritual thing. Yes, even spiritual mountaintops and doing good things for Jesus will not be enough to sustain you. If anything, they can become traps because you've heard the higher they go, the further they fall. So what's his problem? Did he believe that once this happened, everyone would turn and then believe in God, and now he's seeing that they actually haven't, and now Ahab and Jezebel still have their prophets, still have their people leading this false religion, and maybe he's disappointed because he thought all of them would change. Maybe he thought it'd be different. Maybe he thought that after this, he wouldn't be alone by himself running in fear. Maybe he's actually ashamed as he looks in and says, oh my gosh, I don't have nearly as much faith as I used to. And maybe the problem is not that I'm afraid that Jezebel's gonna kill me, but I can't face myself because yesterday I was full of faith and today I'm full of doubt. And I'm so ashamed of who I am on the inside that I just can't stand living in this pain of who I am and what I've done. Is this a spiritual problem? Intellectually, is he wrestling with lies? Is it a relational problem that the moment he gets alone, he doesn't have people around him to support him? Or is there something else? What does God see as the problem? And therefore, what does God give as the solution? Let's see. Verse 5. Then Elijah lay down under a bush and fell asleep. At once, an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around. There by his head was some bread baked over hot coals, a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay back down. What do I need? I need God to give me a word of truth to sustain me. I need God to win my battles. I need him to be my hero, my savior. And what does God do? He shows up as my baker. Huh? What? I'm alone, feeling at my very worst, and what does God look at him and says, hey, you know what you need, E-Man? You need a nap and a snack. Well, that ain't very spiritual. I know. So what does God know that we don't? He knows that he created every single part of you. He created you as a spiritual being made to connect with him. He's made you a physical being, and he looks at your body and says, your body, it's beautiful and strong, and he's made it. He looks at your emotions and says, hey, those emotions I've given you are part of what it means to be a human, and you can't disconnect the emotions from your thoughts and the powerful brain I've given you that separates you from all the animals. But also there's another part of you. There's this relational part. There's these 5 parts: spirit, body, mind, heart, and relationships. He says, I've created all 5 parts of those, and sometimes what you need is one of those more than the other, and what we'll see from Elijah is he needs all 5. And what surprises me here is Jesus doesn't start with a spiritual answer, he starts with a physical answer. Why would he do that? I think maybe Elijah's like my kids. No matter how upset they are and no matter how right I am, sometimes I can't get them to calm down until they've had a nap and a snack. Your blood sugar's low, they just can't hear me. Hey, go down and just do your calm down breaths. Do the thing, the 5 breaths into the candle. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay, I can do it. It's interesting, he starts with the physical before the spiritual. I don't think this is how God always works, but maybe sometimes. I remember 6 years ago, it was a season of my life, just like Elijah. I had been on the top of my career, the top of everything, my family, my financial health, my faith, everything was as good as it's ever been. And then I found myself in this place, sitting in front of a therapist, depressed and stuck. And the problem wasn't just that I was there, it's that I'd been there for 2 months and I couldn't get out. And my therapist looked at me and says, Kyle, we've talked about prayer, I know. We've talked about changing the way you think? Yes. We've talked about changing your relationships? Yes. We've even talked about how we change your mind and all these things. But let me just ask you this. Is it possible that the problem isn't in your head or your heart, but something that needs to change is your body? What you talking about, Willis? She says, tell me, how's your diet and your exercise? So I've been too depressed. I can't run. Remember those times where you came home and your wife said, hey, I can see you're in a cranky mood. Before you come home and try and be a dad, go for a run for 30 minutes? Maybe your wife and God knew something about your body that you didn't realize. And I'm like, me. And I'll do it. Then I didn't. He says, hey, maybe there's something else. Maybe there's something wrong. If this really is primarily, or not primarily, if part of this is who you are as a physical thing, and you can't get the energy, the willpower to go exercise, or even to get out of bed, maybe you should try antidepressants. Oh, hey, antidepressants are great for somebody else. But I don't need it because I'm smart enough, strong enough, I can do all those things. And after a long series of wrestling, I said, I'm desperate, I'll try anything. And at that moment, went on antidepressants, 2 weeks later started to feel better. And then after I did that, then I could start doing all those things I couldn't do before. Then I started thinking clearly. Then my emotions got in check. Then my spiritual connection with God continued to get stronger. Then my relationship started getting better. But what I wanted to do was start with the spiritual thing. And what I was doing subconsciously was denying the body that God had given me. And in this moment, what we see is sometimes God says, I love every single part of you, but we got to start with this one. And I don't know where you got to start today, but one of the things I want to tell you is maybe God's not as spiritual as you think. What? This is the God who showed up in a body, in the person and work of Jesus Christ, right? He could have shown up any way. He could have done angels from heaven. He could have done fire and built the boat. He's done all these things. But what he decided to do, he says, I'm going to become a human being, take on an actual body. I'm going to die on the cross, not just metaphorically, but literally die and literally come back from the dead. And in that, I tell you that a body is a beautiful thing, and a body is part of who you are, whether you want to deny it or not. And when you deny that part of you, you deny the gift I've given you, because God isn't always as spiritual as we'd like to be. Oh, don't worry, we'll get spiritual in a second, but for some reason, for Elijah, he doesn't start there. So let's just ask these questions. Maybe you're here today, and you're like, oh my gosh, I just need a nap and a snack. There's a bunch of you, I'll tell you, 35% of you, according to statistics, 35% of you walked in this room today sleep deprived. Well, what's the big deal? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, good for you. Sleep deprivation actually leads to premature death. Well, that's great news. Hey, let's get better. They're like, well, it's not a big deal. I'm strong. I can handle it. Yep. Yeah, you can, but you say you can handle sleep deprivation. It's like people saying, I can have one more drink and I can handle it. And how do I know that? Because the exact same side effects of drinking too much alcohol are the exact same side effects of sleep deprivation. You don't think clearly. You're impulsive and do things you normally wouldn't. And you get yourself in this false idea of what is good and what isn't. The CDC says it this way: after 18 hours of not sleeping, it's like having a 0.5% blood alcohol level. And after 24 hours, it's 0.1 over the legal limit. So some of you friends, you're here and you're like, I just need a nap. And that's okay. Go home, take a nap. For some of you, your sleep says a different thing. Look what the angel says to Elijah. He says, get up and go. Why? Because maybe Elijah's on the other side of the spectrum. And what does his sleep say about him? Maybe it says he's so depressed that he can't get out of bed, even when he has a supernatural encounter with an angel, supernatural provision of Jesus playing baker, and even water has shown up, miracle, miracle, miracle. And in that, he's like, I'm still so down, I can't get myself out of bed. What does your sleep tell you? Maybe you need to rest and embrace your limits, or maybe there's something that says you, oh my gosh, there's something weighing me down, and my own willpower by itself isn't gonna get me up and out. So what happens then? Verse 7. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat. I love that God gave a clear instruction through an angel, get up and eat. So many of us said, if God would send me an angel, if there's a supernatural sign, or if I would, then I'd be obedient. Well, Elijah wasn't. And maybe you and I wouldn't be either. Sorry. So what does God do? Say, all right, one and done. Elijah, you're a leader. I held you to a higher standard. Therefore, you've got to. No, he sends the angel back and does the exact same thing. Get up and eat. What you see here is God's patience with you that says, even when you don't get it the first time, I'm not going to give up on you. But what does he also do? He says, you need something outside of yourself to get yourself there. When we're convinced that we can always muster the willpower to fight or change that hurt, habit, hang up, whatever's weighing us down, we overestimate our own ability and we don't take advantage of the resources God's given us. So what does God do? God sends an angel to say, hey, you got to make a change. What is God giving you in this season? A word that's prompting you, a person who's there. Maybe it's not this season, maybe it's last season. Maybe there was another person in a previous season who was there and God used to spur you in the right direction. And when you were there, you were like Elijah, you were a little cranky and hangry and didn't treat them well. And you needed to go home today. And before you go to bed, you need to send them a text saying, hey, thanks for putting up with me when I was stuck in my own stuff and I couldn't see my way out. God used you, thank you. Maybe you need to say thank you to Jesus for not giving up on you. But in this high and mighty prophet who just won the Super Bowl, first, he's depressed and wants to kill himself. Then he's disobedient, and the story continues. So uplifting, isn't it? I wish you could see your faces. You're like, okay. So he got up, ate, and drank. Strengthened by the food, he traveled for 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah responded, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant. The Israelites have torn down your altars. The Israelites put your prophets to death. And I am the only one, and now they're trying to kill me. You been there? I am the only one in this company who knows what the problem is and how to solve it. And if they would just listen to me, everything would be great. I'm the only one in this family that realizes how toxic the situation is. I'm half the age of everybody else, but I've watched TikTok, so I understand family dynamics. And if everyone just knew what I knew, those politicians, they're all a bunch of knuckleheads. If they just let me be president or whatever for a day, I would solve. No, you wouldn't. What does he do? He has this over-heightened sense of self. And what does he say? I'm the only one. But is that true? Elijah's a prophet. He speaks the truths of God. And is he speaking the truth? Nope. How do I know that? This is chapter 19. If you just flip one page back, chapter 18, verse 4. When Ahab, the evil king, is trying to kill the prophets of Yahweh, another guy named Obadiah takes 100 prophets, puts 50 in one cave, 50 in another. And so there's 100 prophets there waiting for their moment, being protected by God and waiting for that moment. So Elijah's saying, hey, I'm alone in a cave by myself. I'm the only one. And God's like, no, there's 100 others. Read down later. God is going to lovingly say to Elijah, I know you think you're the other one, but there's 7,000 other folks who've remained faithful. They have not bowed the knee to Baal. They have stood up for truth. They have not kissed the idol. 7,000 of them. How is it possible that one man whose whole identity as a prophet is speaking truth is now so disconnected from reality? I wonder if maybe, just maybe, loneliness doesn't just impact our relationships. I wonder if loneliness impacts the way we see the world. What am I talking about? Remember that thing? The pandemic? Yeah, we all hated it. But remember how when people were disconnected, do you see what happened to folks' mental health? See when people couldn't gather together for weddings, for funerals, for that? How they just felt disconnected? They didn't have a clear sense of reality. And when they were struggling, they didn't have someone to come and help them. And also, they lost track of reality. Why? Because the only view of reality they had was whatever news outlet tells me what I want, whatever social media algorithm just reconfirms that I am awesome all by myself and I don't need anyone because I've got it all figured out. I wonder, friends, if somehow, some way, we have more information at the tip of our fingers than at any time in human history, and we still have a less clear vision of truth, wisdom, and reality than ever before. Amen. What am I talking about? Let's talk about social media for a second. I'm not trying here to make an argument of social media is good or bad. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say it's a neutral thing. Let's talk about how we use it being good or bad. Let me tell you what's happening to your brain as you're on social media. When you're on it, all of a sudden, you're bored or whatever, and boom, dopamine immediately, drug. I love it. And anytime I'm feeling down, I can feel up again. And then I feel down, I feel up again. What does this seem like? An addiction. But not me, okay, maybe not you. But let me just tell you what happens to everyone else. Let's talk about brain waves for a second. I want to talk about 5 brain states. These brain waves, scientists have shown, these are the waves happening in your brain, and at different brain states, you interact with the world differently. The first one you'll see up there is the gamma waves. Fight or flight. Lions, tigers, bears. Oh my, God's given you this amazing ability for adrenaline to pump through your body, and you can run away from bears, lift up cars to save babies. You can do all sorts of crazy, amazing things. Fight or flight, gamma. Beta waves are a little different. Alert. Concentrated thinking. You're in a meeting, you got a team, there's a problem, we're trying to figure this thing out, and we're all bringing kind of our best problem-solving brains. That's the beta. But then there's the alpha waves. The alpha waves are when you're in a more relaxed but creative meditation. I know about you, but sometimes when I'm in a meeting, my best idea comes the moment I walk out the door. Why? Because there's less pressure, my brain can wander, ooh. Some people are like, Kyle, how long did it take you to write that sermon? I'm like, I don't know. How long was my drive to work or my shower? Because as my brain was wandering, all of a sudden, boom, it hit me. I'm like, that's it. Because in this moment where you're relaxed and creative, you're open to new ideas and new possibilities. But then, after that, you get to the theta waves. I'll explain theta in just a second, but the delta waves are when you're in deep sleep. Theta is that place right before or after you wake up, between consciousness and unconscious, between sleeping and awake. Theta waves are also what hypnotists use to lull people into changing their ideas, their behaviors. They get them into this place where their brain is awake enough that it can absorb ideas, but not so awake that it can say, that doesn't make sense. I literally just watched a video of someone doing this where there's a hypnotist who got someone to forget their own name. Why? Because you lull them into this state where they can absorb whatever you say, but they're not awake enough to say, that's not true. That's how 80% of us spend our time on social media. It is not, hey, I wonder what's going on in the world today. I'd love to learn. It's not, oh my gosh, I miss my aunt who lives across the country. I wonder how the baby shower was. For most of it, it's doctor's office. This is boring. I'm in the bathroom. There's nothing to do. And in that moment, what happens? The addiction and the dependence grows. Your brain is turned off. And in those moments, those ideas come and they'll tell you, boom, this is what you need to be happy. I'm not trying to be a hater here, but my experience has been that for most of us, if we want to know the thing that we truly think will make us happy, it's whatever we find on our social media algorithm. For me, it's breaking news, self-help, and just things that are funny, borderline irreverent. Those are the things I'm convinced will make me happy. And let me be clear, friends, when I'm talking and I'm coming heavy and hard on this thing here, every time I come and I preach, let me be clear, I will never ask you to do something I won't do. I will never tell you to do something that I haven't done. I will never do that. That is hypocrisy, except for this 1 minute. I have to confess. Here's literally my, this is my, what is it called? My screen time from this past week. Number 1, YouTube. Number 2, TikTok. I struggle with this. So when I'm telling you this, I am not here to be the old guy, the kids, no. This is me. When there's things in my head and heart that I want to avoid, when there's people or hard conversations I want to avoid, there's a fun outlet right there anytime, and it's just one hit away. But no one looks down on you when you're just doing this. Friends, I'm not here to tell you social media is good or bad, but what I am here to tell you is this. At the way you let it impact your brain, and when we become passive consumers of this, we become enslaved to whatever lies the enemy wants to tell you. Not me. Well, not you, but everyone else in the world. That's why during the TV shows or during the football game, why they have that Budweiser commercial over and over and over. Well, it doesn't impact me. But yeah, these people who have spent millions of dollars studying human behavior are spending millions of dollars to get your attention. Why? Because in the commercial, you're in theta. You're not really paying attention. You're up getting a drink, but in the back of your head, well, you're still listening because you're waiting for the game to come back on Budweiser. Hey, I think I'm thirsty. Must be those chips. Nope. They gotcha. So in that, when he's alone, not listening to God, not listening to God's people, not in community, be able to live into any fantasy he wants, that is when he becomes most susceptible. Don't get me wrong. We start here with this idea that he starts with a nap and a snack. God, body first, but here we are. His mind is being twisted, and God needs to straighten it out. And he will later by saying, no, there's 100 prophets in that cave. There's 1,000 who have not been there. But in this moment, don't listen to the lie when you're all alone, because that's when the lies are the loudest. So what does God do next? We've talked about physical. We've talked about mental and emotional. And here we get spiritual. Then the Lord said to him, go back the way you came to the desert of Damascus. When you go there, anoint King Hazael. Anointing a king is essentially saying, God has said you're going to be the next king. So anoint him to do that. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, over Israel. Boom, you've anointed 2 new kings, one over the south, one over the north. Anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel Mola, Meholah, can't pronounce it, I don't know, to succeed you as prophet. Wait, now the next prophet, wait, I'm not going to be the prophet forever? Wait, someone else? Wait, what does God give Elijah when he's alone in a cave? He gives him a people and a purpose. A people and a purpose. Even this great, amazing prophet can't do this journey of faith as a lone ranger. Earlier this year, I think it was the first Sunday of the year, I was preaching a sermon and I said, hey, if you're part of this church family, you need 5 friends and a job. You need people who are excited to see you when you come here, celebrate with you in the bad stuff. People who've kind of been there, done that, a little older than you, wiser than you, feeding India. And also, younger folks who you can kind of invest in. You need 5 friends and a job. Why? Because Christianity is not a spectator sport. You're part of this family. You've got a role here. Find it. And your life is best when you're living with your people and your purpose. So after service, someone comes up to me and says, Kyle, I need to talk to you. I'm like, uh-oh, what did I do this time? Where's my cave? I want to run away. She said, hey, I've been coming to this church, but I don't have 5 friends and a job. I said, okay, let me help you meet some people. They met some folks. They went about their life, found a place to serve, got in a small group. And 8 weeks ago, man, wife, the husband had a cardiac event and nearly died. Quadruple bypass. Immediately gone into surgery the moment they catch it. And while her husband, is in surgery, I kid you not, her father passes away. Could you imagine? So we've been talking, following up, praying, doing all these things. And in my most recent conversation with her, she's like, I'm just so tired. I'm feeling alone. Like I can't just continue to care. We're at 6 weeks and I love it, every minute of it, but I just don't know how much more I have to give. I said, good, you don't have to give anymore because you're not alone. She's like, what? I said, who has God put around you? She's like, you know what, Kyle, when you say that, I realize my husband got in this small group earlier this year, and now that he's better and can walk again, he's going back to the small group, and he's saying the small group is one of the most life-giving things in his life. Yeah, he's thankful for the doctors and their insight, yes. He loves his physical therapist and going and doing that twice a day. He doesn't really, but he just says it to make her happy. But this third thing is being around people who are there to walk with me and support me. Having my people changes everything. Why? Because pain sucks. Suffering sucks, but it's worse to do it alone. Suffering is always better when you're doing it in solidarity. And having people who can remind you what your purpose is, that's different. When he can go to that small group and say, hey, God's not done with you. They saved you for a reason. What is he doing in your company? What's he doing in your own heart? What's he doing with your own daughter's life? How is God using this? What is God doing to get your attention here in this moment? And you're like, oh, that's right, I have a people and a purpose, and my life is not defined by this one tragic event. My people and my purpose help me see the world more clearly. Who are the folks that God has invited you to connect with? What is the purpose he's put on your heart? Maybe you're here and you're struggling and you're in pain and suffering. You feel like you're all alone. What I want to encourage you to do is head out to that table right through those doors afterwards and get some information about Stephen Ministry. Stephen Ministry are folks in our congregation gone through 50 hours of training to provide one-on-one care. They're not therapists. They're a little bit more than just a friend. They're like a guide, a big brother or sister. It's like, let me just walk with you, pray with you, listen, so that you're not alone. Maybe that's not what you need. I walked out in the lobby last week and there's this group of people waiting for me and I'm like, uh-oh. Usually there's like one or two people and there's a little bit of a line and all that. I'm like, there's a big group. I'm like, I felt like a junior hire again. I'm like, I'm gonna get jumped, what's going on? And there's this small group of women in a Thursday Bible study. And they're like, hey, we just wanna let you know God's doing amazing things. We love you, we love this church, we love this. The ones I remember the most are the two who said, hey, I've never met you before, Kyle. But because of these women, I've got a family. Not because I know the pastor, but because these folks know me. They know the best of me, the worst of me, and they love me and challenge me to be more like Jesus the entire time. Amen. That they're people. Their people help them find their purpose. Being alone, pointing fingers, being alone, woe is me, is not it. Why? Because you are a relational being, and God's called you to be in community for a purpose. And there's one last thing. God wasn't done there. Verse 11. The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Could you imagine Elijah's heart? Alone, depressed in this dark place, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. The God of the universe is going to show up. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. So God, where are you? And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of God, the mouth of the cave. And then the voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Why would God speak in a whisper? To help you understand this, I want to invite my wife, Kelly, to come on up. Love, can you come up here? Give her a round of applause. She hates being on stage. She's like, I'll do this twice a year because I love you. But here we go. Come on over here. And so if I'm here and I want to communicate to my wife how much I love her, I can whisper and say, I love you. She can't hear it. Hey, I planned a great date for us. She can't hear it. Hey, thanks for putting up with me. She can't hear it. And so sometimes there's whispers that you can't hear. But you know what you can always hear? You can always hear the noise, the distractions, the lies of the enemy. The enemy will come and he will shout at you. You are no good. You will never match up. You will never because of this. This is what's wrong with you, and it will always be that way. He will yell, whether it be through your screen, through a person, those voices that you've got deep inside your head and your heart. The enemy comes like a roaring lion, and he will be loud. So why doesn't God just get louder? He doesn't always have to get louder because he wants to get closer. You see, Jesus wants to come near you in your most difficult times and say, you're not alone. I know you feel like you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, but you don't because I'm with you. And I know you feel like it's always going to be this way, but it's not. I'm not only going to transform the world, but transform your heart. And you don't feel alone and down in the dumps because you're far away. No. Even in your darkest moment, I'm closer than you've ever been. Close enough to touch you, close enough to whisper, and close enough that you can hear the voice of God. He whispers because he's close, because he's intimate, because he's connected. And he wants you to know that you can never go so far. There's no cave so dark, no distance so far that his light and love cannot find you. This is why he whispers. Give my wife a hand. You can grab a seat. I don't know what you need today. I don't know what crumbs God has left along the path. Maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I need a nap and a snack. I haven't realized that God's given me this body, and that's my challenge. Maybe you're here, you're like, loneliness and isolation has led me to mental and emotional struggles, and I keep thinking that my own willpower, I can do it, but I can't. I need a people and a purpose. Maybe you're here, you're like, I need to hear from God. And God says, I want to speak to you, but you're living your life with noise-canceling headphones. How could I ever speak to you when you'd rather be on your screen? How can I speak to you when just the idea of sitting in silence terrifies you? Don't get me wrong, sometimes God goes to drastic lengths to get our attention, friends, but I'm telling you, that is almost always the painful way to go. But God says, will you come close enough and listen to my whisper? Friends, this morning as we close, I want to invite you to turn on your noise-canceling headphones, to sit in God's presence, and prepare your heart for a whisper. Maybe God will speak to you right here in this moment. Maybe it's practice so you learn how to hear him in the future. But what we're going to do is we're just going to sit in silence for 3 minutes. Some of you are like, that makes me anxious and crazy. That's okay. Some of you are like, I'm so tired that if I sit for 3 minutes, I'm going to fall asleep. Maybe that's what you need, and that's okay. But maybe, just maybe, you need to stop and realize that you can't do it on your own. And by not trying to do something for 3 minutes, reminds you that God is always at work. So, as we invite you to this 3 minutes of silence, maybe take a posture with your feet on the ground, lean forward, or maybe put your back up against the chair. I like to put my hands up like this as a posture of surrender and being open. I breathe in my nose. In this moment, some of you may feel anxious. That's okay. Just breathe it in and blow it away. Your mind may wander. That's okay. Just pay attention to it. Let it float by like the clouds. Let it pass. I don't know what you need in this moment, but I know what you need most is Jesus. So let's pause to listen to his whisper and to remind our hearts that we need him more than we need our own strength. Let's sit in silence before our Lord and Creator together.